Ambitious topic. Thank you guys for organizing this and for having me. I have no disclosures. So the idea that there's never a good time to have kids as a surgeon is something we've been told probably since before we even went to medical school, but about 60% of female surgeons and more than 90% have kids. So the question is, why are we accepting this? Why are we just saying this is never gonna work? There's always trade-offs. This issue is no different. As a trainee, you're youngish, your job's unlikely to be in jeopardy because you decide to have a kid. Your salary's at its lowest, but it won't be affected. You don't have an independent practice or referral patterns to maintain. However, it's the time where you're least financially secure. You have the least control over your time and probably the most call that you're ever gonna take. It's your opportunity to train. The amount of time you can take for leave is limited without impacting your training. And the potential for experiencing stigma and it impacting your training is also a big concern. I put the impact on peers on this list because I hear it all the time. But you're probably gonna have to use your vacation time as a trainee if you wanna take parental leave of any kind, and everyone else in your program also takes time off every single year. They call it vacation though, so it's not any more than anyone else. So having pregnancies during research years is touted as the optimal time to have kids, in addition to the other advantages of training. During research, you tend to have more control over your time and fewer clinical responsibilities. It tends to impact others a little bit less when you happen to take that time off. There's definitely still stigma. The demands of residency are there when you're going back. Parental leave can also impact your research productivity, and not everyone has the opportunity or desire to take research years. Once you've left training, you're much more likely to have financial freedom and control over your time. The concerns that you might have about matching for a fellowship or getting a first job aren't there anymore. But as you get further along in your career, fertility declines for women. The potential cost of parental leave is also higher. Unpaid leave is common and it's expensive. For people in private practice, you may have to pay overhead while you're not generating any income. Productivity measures are rarely decreased for any kind of leave, and that's going to compound financial issues going forward. Established referral patterns may be affected and may not return later. There's a potential for impact on promotion for academic surgeons, and there's also stigma. You're starting to notice the theme about the stigma. A third of female surgeons report fertility issues, which is about 3 times the rate of the rest of the population. And in every procedural field that's been studied, pregnant women have higher rates of complications compared to non-surgeons. In a 2012 survey that examined some trends amongst female surgeons, they demonstrated that women who trained in earlier time periods were less likely to have kids during training, and that overall, most surgeons tend to wait. Some of the negative influences that people cited were their male co-residents and faculty, though this has decreased somewhat in recent years. Most respondents felt that pregnancy was stigmatized. When trainees do decide to have children, the vast majority continue to work until birth, even though there's a strong belief that their health is impacted by doing this. Nearly 80% take less than 6 weeks of leave, and interestingly, they cite the ABS policy as a barrier. One of the issues that trainees also face relates to lactation. Nearly all trainees cite this as an important issue for them, and they all stop breastfeeding sooner than they wanted, mostly because of things like lack of convenient locations to pump and not wanting to ask to leave a case. So almost 40% of residents thought that during this, that they might leave surgery altogether and would discourage female medical students from pursuing surgery. And that's obviously a problem if we want to attract the best students to our field. 73% of residents said that they witnessed faculty members or other residents making comments about pregnant trainees, and they were concerned that they were perceived poorly. So a lot of people don't know what the actual ABS policy is, and when I look at it, I say, wait a minute, this can actually be used to be a really good thing rather than a barrier. Residents can average their annual 4 weeks of vacation over the first 3 or the last 2 years of residency, and an additional 2 weeks is available to anyone who needs it during residency for things like health reasons. So a resident could bank their vacation, use 2 years worth of it at the same time, and then take an additional 2 weeks to reach 10 weeks of leave without impacting their board eligibility or taking much more time away from the hospital than other residents. Another option is to graduate off cycle, and with fellowship starting in August, that's certainly a more flexible option now. And less popular is to spread your 5 years out over 6, but it can be done. The caveat is that your program leadership has to support you stacking your vacation this way, and that they have to seek approval sometimes, and that certainly is going to vary. Program directors on a whole believe that becoming a parent has a negative impact on their trainees and the quality of their work. They're concerned about how it affects other residents. Interestingly, half of the people that think that there's a negative impact on women extend that to the male trainees. About 50% of the people who responded to this survey had a kid during residency, but only one of them was female. Some of the commonly discouraging reasons are impact on other residents and on program function, as well as concerns about how it affects the individual's training. There's no studies in surgery about this specifically, but in OBGYN, taking maternity leave doesn't affect overall case volumes at the time of graduation. What we can't measure is the bias. We know that female trainees face differences in operative autonomy, teaching, and evaluations, but whether this extends even further if they have children hasn't been established, and it hasn't been examined at all for men. We all know that being a woman means overall you're less likely to have as many published research articles, speak at grand rounds, at national meetings, achieve leadership roles. But in a survey of ACS surgeons in academic practice, marital status wasn't affecting productivity, nor was childbearing for men or women. This challenges some of these preconceived notions by providing actual data. The survey didn't address some of the biases again about how promotion and how perception changed with it. Most women in that survey believed that barriers were insurmountable. So we deal with unpredictable long hours, we have guilt. Women who have very young children have to think about whether or not they want to breastfeed and deal with pumping at work. All parents have to figure out childcare and spend time with their children as well. Stigma is one of the biggest issues that makes us say there's really never a good time. Having a child doesn't objectively impact the number of cases we do, it doesn't impact the number of papers we publish, but it does impact how we're treated. 2 out of 3 women report negative attitudes. Unspoken rules and culture affect us every day, but they haven't caught up to our reality. Implicit bias is a set of beliefs that we all develop. Early in life, they carry us through life and are the lens through which we see the world. It's the reason that our letters of recommendation commend the female trainees for all they accomplished despite having children. And they don't say that about the men who have children. It contributes to wage gaps, and the comments from patients that we don't look like a surgeon. So Caprice Greenberg talked about this at ASC several years ago. It's a great talk called Sticky Floors and Glass Ceilings. If you haven't seen it, you should. But the most powerful part of this to me was that it's all changeable. These are not fixed beliefs. If there's awareness and motivation to change, it can be converted into action, but most of us as millennial surgeons aren't in a position to make those changes, so we need to push our leadership to make those changes. Changing attitudes and culture, first and foremost, requires us acknowledging it, saying that we want an equity analysis, and not just a parented analysis, not just gender, but equity of all sorts to support diversity is important, and then forcing people to act on the findings. Training people about implicit bias is important. Saying that we need to do the right thing is important. Paid leave, whether it's parental or medical, can benefit everyone in your department. Adjusting our view expectations for leave and not making up call is important. And policies that enable people to have work-life integration rather than having to make choices that they defend every day will benefit everyone. So, as millennials who maybe aren't making the rules, we have to advocate on behalf of others. When you see your residents struggling, we have to speak up for them because they can't speak up for themselves. When you see your partner, who's maybe also millennial, struggling, you can speak up for them as well. Talk about your own experiences, ask for what you need because you will make some incremental changes. Be an example and find ways to make it work. There's no reason that we should accept that it's not a good time. Thanks very much, guys. These are some of my favorite surgeon parents.